The city cafe is a blur of motion. The espresso machine hisses, a sharp, metallic burst that cuts through the overlapping static of a dozen conversations. A man sits at a corner table. His fingers tap a frantic, uneven rhythm against the cold ceramic of his mug. He stares at his laptop screen, jaw tight, eyes scanning lines of text that refuse to resolve. The noise is a physical weight, pressing against his temples. He reaches for his drink, but his hand stops. The clatter of plates freezes mid-air. A waiter, mid-stride, hangs suspended in the aisle. The roar of the room vanishes, replaced by an absolute, hollow silence. The man exhales, a long, slow release of air that causes his shoulders to drop 2 inches. He looks at the stillness, at the frozen world around him, and the tension in his face finally breaks. He leans back into the chair, the silence holding the space where the chaos used to be. He looks directly forward, his gaze steady, and the weight of the world seems to settle into a manageable, quiet observation. The frantic tapping of his fingers stops. He speaks into the silence. At some point, you have probably thought, why does life feel like this? Like no matter what you fix, something else breaks. No matter what you achieve, it is never quite enough. The Buddha had a name for that feeling, and a map out of it. The scene splits. On the left, a woman holds a glass of champagne, her face bleached white by a sudden flashbulb at a crowded party. She is smiling, but the smile does not reach her eyes. On the right, that same woman sits in the dark at 2 a.m. Her face is illuminated only by the harsh blue glow of a phone screen. She is motionless, her eyes scanning a feed, searching for something she cannot name. Most people think Buddhism is pessimistic because it starts with suffering. I think it is the opposite. It is the only philosophy honest enough to name the problem before offering the solution. The first noble truth is not that life is miserable. It is more precise. The Pali word dukkha means unsatisfactoriness. It is that subtle, grinding friction beneath your happiest moments. He looks down at his hands, then back at the camera. I remember a year when every box was checked. I had the job, the apartment, the health. By every standard metric, I was winning. Yet, I spent my evenings pacing the hallway of that apartment, unable to name the weight in my chest. He pauses, his eyes tracking a dust mote drifting through the air. This truth hit me hardest, not during a crisis, but during a really good year. Everything was going right, and I still felt this persistent, low-frequency undercurrent of unease. I would sit on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, waiting for the other shoe to drop, even though nothing was falling. That is dukkha. It is not about tragedy. It is about that quiet, nagging suspicion that you are missing something, even when you have everything you thought you wanted. Naming it was the first real relief I ever felt. It meant I was not broken. I was just human, experiencing a fundamental friction. The camera cuts to a close-up of a hand reaching into a pile of dry, coarse sand. The fingers tighten, knuckles whitening as they strain to hold the grains in place. But the sand is relentless. It spills through the gaps, sliding over the skin and falling onto the floor in a steady, rhythmic stream. The second truth says suffering has a cause, and that cause is craving. In Pali, it is called tanha. Think of it as a thirst that cannot be quenched by water. It is the craving for things to be permanent in a world that is fundamentally in motion. We want the moment to last, we want the feeling to stay, and we want the version of ourselves that we like to remain frozen in time. But the world does not work that way. He flexes his own fingers, mimicking the tension on screen. The harder we grip, the faster it slips away. That friction you feel? That is the sound of your own hands trying to hold back the tide. He turns his gaze toward a smartphone lying on the table, its screen flickering with a rapid succession of notifications. We live in a culture that does not just tolerate craving, it monetizes it. Every app, every advertisement, every infinite scroll feed is engineered to make you want more. They map your desires, predict your impulses, and feed them back to you in real time. He taps the screen, and a notification pops up, then vanishes instantly. The Buddha diagnosed this mechanism 2,500 years ago. He called it the root of our restlessness. Today, that diagnosis is either terrifying or incredibly useful. It means your dissatisfaction is not a personal failure. It is a product. You are being programmed to believe that the next purchase, the next click, or the next update will finally fill the void. But the system is designed to keep the void open. It thrives on your hunger. If you are constantly satisfied, the machine stops running. That is why the feed never ends. That is why the ads never stop. We are trapped in a loop of engineered desire, chasing a version of ourselves that is always just one more purchase away. Recognizing that the game is rigged is the only way to stop playing by its rules. It is a cold, hard look at the architecture of our own discontent. On the screen, the hand remains locked in a white-knuckled fist. The man watches it, then gestures for the camera to zoom in. Slowly, the thumb moves. Then the index finger. The tension leaves the tendons one by one. The palm flattens, and the last of the sand drifts down, leaving the skin clean and empty. The third truth is the one most people overlook. It says the suffering that comes from craving can actually cease. It does not happen by getting everything you want. It happens by loosening the grip on needing things to be a certain way. He leans back, his own hands resting flat on the table. This is not numbness. It is not about becoming a hollow shell or losing your passion for life. It is freedom. Imagine walking through a storm without trying to stop the rain from falling. You are still there. You are still moving. But you are no longer fighting the weather. When you stop demanding that reality conform to your expectations, the friction vanishes. You are finally able to see the world as it is, rather than as you need it to be. It is the quietest, most powerful shift you can make. The moment you stop trying to hold the sand, you are no longer defined by how much of it you can keep. He recalls a summer afternoon spent in a small walled garden. An elderly woman was there, her hands deep in the dark, damp soil. She worked with a quiet, focused intensity, pruning stems and clearing weeds, her movements rhythmic and precise. Every plant was a testament to her labor. Then, the sky turned a bruised purple. Within seconds, a sudden, violent rainstorm hammered the earth. The wind whipped through the branches, snapping the stalks she had just tended. The flowers she had nurtured were beaten flat into the mud. He watched from the doorway, expecting her to scramble, to shield the beds, or to cry out in frustration. Instead, she simply stood up. She wiped the wet earth from her palms, looked at the ruined garden for a heartbeat, and turned to walk inside. Her expression did not change. There was no panic, no lingering resentment, and no attempt to fight the storm. She had loved the garden, she had worked the soil, but she was not tethered to the result. I have met people who live fully, who love deeply, work hard, and enjoy the sun, yet they do not shatter when the rain comes. They are not enslaved by the outcome. The camera moves through a dense forest, following a winding, uneven trail. Sunlight filters through the canopy, dappling the ground in shifting patterns of gold and shadow. A hiker walks steadily ahead, not rushing toward a summit, but placing each foot with deliberate intention. He stops, looking at the path that stretches into the trees. The fourth truth is the eightfold path. It is the practical roadmap. Right understanding, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. These are not rigid rules to follow. They are more like directions on a map. He steps over a protruding root, his balance steady and controlled. What I love about this path is that it starts with understanding, not behavior change. Most self-help reverses this. It tells you to act differently before you see differently. Buddhism says, change how you see, and the actions follow naturally. He points to the trail ahead, where the path curves out of sight. It is a process of refinement. You do not need to be perfect to start walking. Back in the city cafe, the noise returns in a rush. The espresso machine hisses, plates clatter against tables, and overlapping voices create a wall of static. But the man does not tap his fingers against his mug. He does not check his screen. He sits still, his hands resting flat on the table, watching the crowd with a slight, steady smile. The frantic rhythm of the morning has dissolved. The Four Noble Truths are not a theology. They are a diagnosis and a prescription. Life contains friction. Friction comes from grasping. You can stop grasping. Here is how. That is it. 2,500 years of wisdom, distilled into 4 simple sentences. It is still more useful than most things published this year. He stands up, leaves his empty mug on the table, and walks toward the exit, moving through the blur of the cafe without colliding with the motion around him. If this landed, The next video goes deeper into the Eightfold Path, one step at a time. We will break down each practice so you can apply it to your own life. Subscribe so you do not miss it. He pushes the glass door open, steps out into the cool air of the street, and disappears into the flow of the city.